Hi, Chief. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your name?
Harry Tibbetts. I come on the fire department December 18th, 1968, about 4 months after I got out of the Air Force. And the reason I got interested in the fire department was because it's kind of a family business, as is with most, not most, but many of the people on the fire department. There's a family history. I had an uncle, came on the job in February of 1942. When my dad got back from World War II, he came on. Then my uncle and 3 more uncles, total of 3. I came on, and then about a year later, my brother came on. And I got my daughter's on. Both of my brother's sons are on fire departments, although they're not IFD. And we just, it's a family business. There's 16 of us that I'm either related to by blood or by marriage that are on fire departments.
Good. And you grew up on the southwest side?
Yeah, we lived pretty much down close to Kentucky Avenue and Morris Street. And at that time, my dad was stationed at Station 4, which was located at West and Morris Street. So a lot of times my brother and I would walk over there and play around the firehouse, get on the engine, knock the boots over and everything. And it was just something that came pretty natural to us. I was saying earlier, one of my first memories was at that station, my dad put my brother and I in his arms and wrapped his legs around the pole and slid down the pole. And that thing had probably 18-foot high ceilings, and it was my first experience on a pole, and I probably wasn't over 3 or 4 years old. So it's a family business situation.
So that was the old house that had the horses and buggies originally?
Yeah, that I've got pictures that show the house as it was when my dad was there. Had the cars parked in the alley to the side of it, and then another picture, you can tell it's the same building, and there's a steam engine with horses on it. It was called the Southern Station.
So they moved out of there in when was the Fords built?
I think probably around the early to mid 60s. They built a lot of stations of that type in those days.
You talked about when it actually came down to you applying for the fire department. What were you doing? Did you have a job before? What was going on in your life when you actually decided to go through and talk about the process of getting hired?
Okay, well, as I said, I had just gotten out of the Air Force in August, and I had come home on leave and done some things like taking the test and different things like that. And I had saved my money, so I didn't have to work, so I didn't. I stayed home. I mean, I was waiting on information from the fire department. I was getting anxious for it. And so I practiced my knots and all that sort of thing that I was learning in fire school. The funny thing about the fire school was I was the last class, my class, who was hired and didn't get paid to go to school. We went to school from 6 to 9 o'clock, Monday through Friday, for about 6 weeks. I figured out it's about 85 hours of training. Now they're getting like 800 hours training. It just wasn't that important to give that training in those days. And I can remember my dad was retired, and I couldn't tie some of those knots. I had trouble with them, like all recruits do. And my dad said, "You dummy," he'd tie it behind his back, put the thing, even after 20-some years, he knew how to tie his knots. So a lot of times I think the older guys don't get the respect that they should, and they're really pretty good people.
So what other things did they train on? Obviously, hose evolutions, ladder evolutions, did they touch on EMS at all back then?
Not at all. And one thing that I want to mention too, one of the biggest changes that has happened in the time I was on is the use of the breathing apparatus. Those breathing apparatus were only invented in like 1964. Each engine in those days had, it was either one or two of them up on the hose reel behind the cab. And to get to it, you had to either crawl over the hose bed, it was in a box, and pull it down and open it up and put it on. No walk-away brackets or anything like that. And the training was terrible. They showed us three kinds of masks. One of them was what they called a windicator, is World War I technology. Just a canister on your chest and the mask. And you can look at movies or videos of World War I, when the gas attacks happened, they put those on, and that was all those consisted of. They said, don't use them underground, don't use them for carbon monoxide, don't use them for this, don't use them for that. And I pretty much said, I'm not using that. But even into probably the 1980s, there were guys on the job that would swear that that was the best mask that the fire department ever had. The other one was a Chemox, which was it was a rebreather. You had to blow up these lungs on the side of it. It took like 10 minutes to get in operation. The only thing it might be good for is if you were going underground, you were going to be under there for a long time. And here's what we got for compressed air mask. They showed it to us. One of the instructors put it on. They laid it on the table and said, each of you sometime tonight ought to put that on. That was it. And back in those days, hardly anybody ever wore them. If you did, like I said, you had to go through all kinds of trouble to put it on. I saw a guy named Denny Hornacher, and he was the first guy that I ever saw who wore a mask on every run. And a lot of people give me credit for that, but I'm telling you right now, it was not me. I was the second guy, but he was the first guy. And I said, well, this was pretty easy. All I had to do was lay it up on the hose bed of the engine, and then on the way to the fire, put my coat on, wrap my arm around the bar and put that mask on, standing up on the back of the engine. And those things weighed 35 pounds. And it's a wonder I didn't get killed, get thrown off of the thing, but worked out all right. And when I had a chance, when I went to the training academy to make a difference on the use of breathing apparatus, I made sure that those guys came out of there knowing everything about those breathing apparatus, skip breathing, everything there was to know about it. And that it evolved into what they commonly referred to in those days, and I don't know if they still do or not, as Hell Week, because I had them for a full week, and we put them through everything we could think of. And I believe that made them more confident in the masks, and I know I felt better sending them out, knowing that they knew how to operate those.
What are some of the other things, in kind of sticking with recruit school, that you remember about maybe the instructors or the structure of it? Was it militaristic, and how do you think that's changed today, or if any?
I don't know how it is today. I know it's long, but I ran a pretty tight ship when I ran training. I went there as the engine instructor, and then I was the assistant director, and then I became the training director, and I was there for 7 years. And I trained 155, I think it was, IFD firefighters and some firefighters from outside the IFD. But I'd like to keep it, make sure that the guys and gals, when they came out of there, knew what they were supposed to do, knew their jobs. And I firmly believe that you only get one chance to recruit firefighters. And if you don't do a good job of it, and even more importantly, if you don't get rid of some of them that are not cut out for this work, you're going to be stuck with them for 30 years. And I always thought about that when I'd decide whether or not to recommend termination. would I want to ride the back step with this guy? Would I want to go in with this guy? Could you trust him? The answer in some cases was no. We used to flush about 10%, and that doesn't mean that if we had 20 students, I had to get rid of 2. It means sometimes I get rid of 4 or 5, and other times 40 would get through without losing any. It all depended on how they wanted to operate. If they took to the job and wanted to do a good job, then I'd send them out. What happens then is you send them out pretty well checked out, and it's up to the officers in the companies to see to it that they continue learning.
What are some of the characteristics you look for in recruits when, not only when you were in training and training other recruits, but what do you think overall are good qualities that when you're going to set somebody free, they want to have this characteristic, this quality, and you feel confident when they go out? Okay,
well, you want to make sure they know their job. You want to make sure they have a willingness to learn. I always made sure that they came to work on time. They had the proper attitude. We used to have them call the instructors, and the word we used was any incumbent firefighter, sir or ma'am. And you just have to get them into that frame of mind from day one in recruit school. And if you can do that, chances of turning out somebody that will make a good firefighter are pretty good. Other requirements or other characteristics. I think if they know their job and are respectful, that's about the main thing. I suppose a willingness to learn. Volunteer to do things, help out, go beyond what is required of you. I know when I came on, my dad and all my uncles said, do your share and a little more. Get up and do the dishes. Offer to help cook. All those kind of things. You want that. You want to have people do that when they get out in the companies, because the name that you make for yourself in the first few months you're out there is going to stick with you the rest of your career.
Does hard work around the firehouse translate to confidence from an officer on the fireground?
Yeah, I think so. If you show competence in everything that you do, he'll have more, confidence in you to do what's required and do what he wants you to do. Yeah, I think so.
Do you remember your first run?
Yeah, I do. 1415 Montcalm, smoky furnace. I went in there on December 18th, sat right behind the engine. They had a round table right behind the engine at 23s. I sat there all day when I wasn't helping with the dishes and helping cook and doing the housework, because I didn't want them to leave me if I got a run. And I remember I went down there, the run came in, and jumped on the back of that engine and took off down there. And it was a coal furnace that the pipe that led to the chimney had fallen out, so it was filling the whole house up with coal smoke. Nobody put on a mask. We all just went in there and stuck the pipe back up in there and recommended that they get a furnace guy to come out and do anything else that was necessary, and that was the first run. My first fire, that was over on Eugene Street, just east of what was then called Northwestern Avenue. It's MLK now. And it was a concrete block house, and the fire was in the basement, and I had gotten to work early, as you're supposed to when you're a new guy, or you're supposed to all the time. And the B shift, the captain there, when we got there, there's smoke coming out of every place, and this was a fire. And the captain handed me the nozzle and said, go right in the front door. And I did. And as soon as I walked in that front door, it felt like somebody shoved a hot poker down my throat. It burned everything all the way down my nose. Man, I dropped to my knees, got down on my stomach, and I swear to God, I remember this as well as I'm sitting here. I thought, how can my dad and my uncles do this? There's no way I can do it. So 14s came in, they went around the back of the house, opened the back door, jumped down in the basement, knocked the fire down. I was maybe 10 feet inside the front door by the time they did that. That's another thing I learned, that teamwork is an important part of this job. One company comes in and does one thing, and another comes in, pretty soon you get the job done. But I do remember that fire. Yep.
Can you expand on what you were just talking about as far as the working parts of a fire, and whose jobs are what, for the, say the general public, maybe not Brian and I, but for the general public that may not know?
Well,
so many fire trucks at a scene.
Okay. The engine company has a few duties, pretty important ones. One of them is to lay hose lines out, take the lines inside the building, and put water on the fire. There's an old saying, the sooner you can get water on the fire, the faster things will start to get better. While they're doing that, they may do some ventilation. They'll search. I know in my career, I've had to pull out a half a dozen people that I found while I was advancing a hose line. The engine company in those days, when I first came on, they used to use the acronym LOVERS. I hope I can remember them all. The jobs that the engine, or not the engine company, the truck companies did was ladder, overhaul, ventilate, forcible entry, rescue, and salvage. And that was the things that they had to do. So when you have a fire, the engine crew tries to make entry, but it may take the truck crew to come up there and make forcible entry because they have the tools to do that. Then when you go in, the truck crew is doing the search while the engine crew's trying to put the fire out. It looks like mayhem on the outside, but believe me, there's a method to it.
How do you think it's changed from the structured command system that we use today versus 1968?
Well, I'm a incident command proponent. I think a lot of firefighters got injured and killed simply because they got lost. Nobody knew they were missing until, it's too late. And you had people doing things that sometimes, where they sometimes operated opposing, bringing hose lines in the wrong, the front and back of the door. Anyway, I believe that the incident command system that we have nowadays is far superior to the old days. The example I give, I teach a lot of classes in tactics, and well, I used to. I don't much anymore. But when you'd have a big fire, and you'd have what they call surround and drown, you'd have hose lines all around the building, and you'd be sitting there on maybe a 2.5-inch line, throwing water at the building, doing just fine. And then you look, and these guys always circulated clockwise. Be a chief officer would come up to you, and wherever you were located, you were either too close or too far back. They felt obligated to move you. So they, if you were up too close, they'd move you back. Okay, you'd move back and you'd be settling in again, and you'd look, and here come another one, circling around the building clockwise. And they would, wherever you were, they'd move you to the other position. And they went around the building doing this all the time. Nobody was in charge of the entire situation. Well, I shouldn't say nobody was. Somebody was, but they didn't have any communication. We didn't even have radios when I first came on. The portable radios, you'd have to send somebody in person to send a message. So it was hard to keep track like that. Now there's no excuse for us not to.
Can you talk a little bit more about a lot of the other equipment that's changed over time in your career?
Well, the breathing apparatus is the number one. There's various types of hose appliances that they have nowadays that we didn't have. Of course, all the EMS equipment. There were only 3 rescue squads in the whole city back then, 14s, 7s, and 17s, and they took care of all the vehicle extrication, and they didn't have anything like your hydraulic tools, electric tools, and all that like they have nowadays. Everything was, you pumped it up. One of my uncles, Jack Hedges, was on Squad 7 for many years. It was totally different. I don't even know if there were EMTs then. I think they just took Red Cross courses in first aid, and that was, that's a big change now. Now, they could put you on a defibrillator and all kinds of stuff that they didn't even have in those days. As far as other equipment, I can't think what it all comes down to. Even today, somebody's got to get in there and put some water on it, and that requires hoses, and it's hard to make many changes. Well, I guess the large diameter hose, that would be one, and we got rid of the old cotton jacketed hose that I think they had brass couplings on them, and I think they weighed 55 pounds per section for a 2.5-inch hose. Now they got the plastic hoses. I don't know if that's the proper term for it. I can't think of it right now. Anyway, another thing I think that's changed is when I was at the training academy, we started doing engineer certification class that involved hydraulics. I taught that class, a hydraulics class. They got practice driving, all kinds of things like that that they never had before, and you had to be certified and recertified. I was talking to Chief Dryman a couple days ago, and he tells me that they have an EVOC course that they have to recertify in every year now, and those are changes that are for the good. The accidents that we used to have, there were quite a few of them. I always said if we wanted to cut the accidents by 90%, we should take reverse gear out of the fire trucks because most of these accidents are backing into somebody. So anyway, that's some of the stuff that I can think of.
You talked about EMS a little bit. What was the process like if you had a medical emergency with the patient? Can you just talk about how they kind of just threw them in the back of a wagon? Because I think that's fascinating for some people who don't even have a clue if that's how it used to be.
Yeah. It was like a station wagon, the ambulances in those days, and it was barely high enough for the cot with the patient on it to get in there. I don't even know how those they called them attendants in those days, how they got in this ambulance, and that was it. It was just throw them in there and you can get them out of there. At some point, I can't remember when it was, I learned what was called then mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and I've used it a couple times on people that I pulled out of houses. And now they don't even do that. They have this hands-free stuff. They got, I don't know, bags to ambu bags. I don't know what they're using nowadays. I've been retired 20 years, so other than what I hear from my daughter, I don't know some of the stuff that's going on now.
Can you kind of go through your career, like where you spent your time in, and go how you came up through the ranks? Because I don't think we really covered, like, what stations you got promoted at and went to this and this. Okay,
well, on the first day I went to Engine 23. My dad had been stationed there and had retired 3 or 4 years before I got out of the Air Force. And my daughter was stationed there before it closed, so she was 3rd generation there. Sub for a couple years, I think like 23 months. And then I went regular on Engine 23. Stayed there for 9 years till I got promoted to lieutenant, and I went to Engine 28, and I was up there, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, and then I went to the training academy, as I said earlier, as the engine instructor. Then I got promoted to assistant director, Then I took a little 6 months that I went from the training academy out to the companies on Squad 33 out on the west side. And I was out there for, I don't know, maybe a year or so. I can't remember for sure now. It wasn't long. And the fire chief, the training director at the time, left the job. And we were down at the shops one day, and the fire chief, who was Chief Striedelmeyer at the time, he came over to me. He was down there doing something, and he came over and he said, "Are you putting in for that training chief's job?" And I said, "Do you want me to?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Then I will." Because in them days, when the chief asked you to do something, you just did it, period. So I did. I went back there as the training director and finished up. Total of 7 years, like I said, and I think put out some pretty good recruits, trained some people on some things that they didn't know about. Went well. Then I went to Battalion 13. Spent, and that's at West and Ohio. Is that called 13 still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Battalion is Battalion 7.
Battalion 7, that's what I got confused on. I stayed there until Chief Smith promoted me to deputy. Well, first it was division chief, and then after a year he promoted me to deputy chief of operations and training. And I stayed there until July 1st, 1999, when I retired. I do have a couple other. When I retired, I went to work for Perry Township Fire Department for about 6 months doing training for them. And then I got the fire chief's job in Pike Township, and I did that for a little over 3 years. And then I went to Wayne Township, and I was a training director there for, I don't know, year and a half. And then they asked me to take the operations chief's job. I couldn't get out of it, and did that, and then went back to the training director's job, and then I retired in, well, I can't remember when it was 13 years ago. Anyway, been retired ever since then.
Do you recall any interesting runs, fires stick out for you throughout your career?
There was a lot of them, and one that I want to talk about was when I was on that squad out at 33s. We got a dog bite run one Saturday night, and we went out in the squad, myself and Mike Notter, who's passed away. And it was either on Patton or Eisenhower Drive, right around the corner from the station. And we treated the dog bite, told the people they should take the kid in for a tetanus, as a kid, for a tetanus shot. And the people in the house, and this was like, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe not that early, maybe midnight. People that lived in the house said, "We can't understand that the dog that bit this kid is a big old shaggy dog, big tall wide thing." And he said, the kids literally hang from that dog's fur, and that drags him around, and he's never bit anybody before. I said, "Well, okay." So we packed up our boxes and we're leaving, and I heard somebody yelling, "Fire, fire, fire." And I looked next door, and the house was on fire next door. And that dog belonged at that house. What he was, I think, trying to do was say, "Hey, my house is on fire." So here we are, 2 of us. The squad had a pump on it, but we only had like a 100-gallon booster tank. So Mike Notter says, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Get on the radio, put the pump in gear, get on the radio and call the cavalry. I'll go in there and do what I can." So I'll tell you how strongly I feel about breathing apparatus. I didn't even put my fire coat on. I put my breathing apparatus on, grabbed the nozzle, and took off for the front door. Probably get laid off for that now. Opened the door. The time of day it was, there was no lights on. I'm thinking the bedrooms are to the left. I'm thinking I'm going to do the thing that I just mentioned a while ago. I'm going to put some water on the fire. Then I'm going back to those bedrooms and start doing a search. About that time, Mike Notter says, what do you want me to do? I said, take some of these windows out. So he started taking the windows out, and I searched the bedrooms and the bathroom on that side of the house. I was heading back down to the living room when I heard somebody in the back. It was Cliff Polly, who's passed too. He says, "Hey, buddy, get out of there! Get out of there!" And the engine had gone around to the back and got in the back door. And when Cliff Polly was saying that, he reached up and tugged at the guy's boxer shorts, and when he did, the guy fell over backwards. He was standing at the kitchen sink, dead, and he fell over backwards. I would have found him in another few seconds. And I tell you all that to say this, it's probably the niftiest piece of firefighting I ever did. Been in charge of bigger fires, had bigger fires, but for two of us to do as much as we did that day, it was a pretty good deal. I'm very, very proud of that. The other two big ones that I can think of were Thermogas, which was a propane gas company down on Madison Avenue in Sumner. And what had happened was one of the night people there, this is what we found out later, was filling up these propane tanks that are on the back of a tow motor, what do you call them? Warehouse forklifts. Big ones, hundreds of them sitting around there, and two 30,000-gallon ones, horizontal tanks sitting on the ground. And the guy had a heart attack and fell over. And I don't know how it happened, but the propane kept coming out. And it finally found an ignition source and ignited and started setting those tanks off. Well, I was a deputy chief at the time. I got to run. By the time I got over there, it was still going pretty good. And the reason I want to tell this story is this rivalry that is between engine companies and ladder companies showed itself that night. I got up there and I saw truck 7 sitting on a 3-inch line throwing water at those tanks, those 30,000-gallon tanks. Now the truck guys, that's rare to see them on a line. And the lieutenant was Mark Rapp, and he had Howard Stahl with him. Guys are big shots now. And they were sitting there, and I said, "What are you truck guys doing on this line?" Mark Rapp never hesitated. He looked up and said, "Them engine guys are afraid to come back here." And I started laughing. And so a few minutes later, I realized that we needed to move the line over to the right. So I went back to them and I said, "I want you guys to move that line about 20 feet over here so you can hit both of those tanks instead of just the one you're hitting." Mark Rapp said, "Well, we're supposed to stay away from the ends of those tanks." Now here we got 60,000 gallons of propane gas. And I said to him, "Well, first of all, I want to say you are taught to stay away from the ends of tanks, but that's mainly gas tanks. Gasoline tanks. Propane, when it gets loose, expands to 400 times its original size, so it would have engulfed us all in a cloud of propane anyway." I said to him, "Are you kidding me?" Well, it's not the word I used. I said, "If those tanks blow, it'll take a search party 2 weeks to find our dog tags. Now move the line." And he said, "Okay, I get you." And so they moved the line. But nothing blew. But those propane tanks, if they'd have punctured one of those 30,000-gallon tanks, I wouldn't be here today. The other one was kind of like that in some ways, was metalworking lubricants. And that was down on the south side, just below Morris Street. And what they did there was they took in oil from your Jiffy Lubes and, all Mr. Quick and all that, and they purify it and they turn it into machine oil so that they can use it on lathes and that type of thing. And we had, that particular day, I was down at the catering hall signing a check for my daughter's wedding for the catering. The run comes in, and I said, girls, get in the car, my wife and my daughter. We took off, and we got up there, and I parked them back in the staging area, and I said, don't get out of this car, stay here. So I went up there. I was on the command bus for quite a while. We could not get it out. We had all this flammable liquid stuff. We'd almost get it out, and so it'd take off again. And I'll tell you this too. You never want to disregard anybody's opinion on the fire ground. I remember as I was walking up to the command bus to get on it to take command, there was a guy leaning up against the front bumper of the command bus, firefighter, and he says, they ought to call the airport and get those crash trucks in here. First thing I did when I got on that bus was say, call the airport and get the crash trucks in there. Thank you, Private, whoever you were. Anyway, get there, and we're working on it. And I was in the Air Force Reserves after I got out of the regular Air Force. After 13 years, I went back in the reserves, and I was a fire protection specialist. So we did a lot of pit fires, putting out flammable liquid fires and everything. So Chief Smith got to the scene of the fire, and he took command. And I said, Smitty, let me take two companies back there and see if we can finish this off. He said, okay. So I grabbed 13s and 19s who were hazmat trained, and I took them in there, one on one side and one on the other. I quick like a bunny taught when the crash truck came in, we had the 5-gallon buckets of AFFF, and I showed a couple of those guys how to make a chain gang and pass the buckets up to the top of the crash truck. You spike them and let them drain into there. It's a big deal, but anyway, they wouldn't have known it probably. So we made one more attack. I told the crash truck, I said, you go ahead and shoot everything you've got till you run out of water, and then we'll go in and try to finish it off. And we did, we put it out. That was another fire that I was pretty proud of, based on, again, having the right people there, the hazmat people, having a little specialized knowledge. A few years after that, I was teaching some classes up at Westfield Fire Department. Smitty had retired from IFD, and he was the chief up there. And I came up there that evening to teach the class, and he had some guys sitting in his office, and he was talking to them, and I walked in there, and he said, I want to tell you guys a little story about this guy here. He said, he was telling about that fire, and he said, Harry told me, let me go back there, and if I can't put it out, I won't come back. I said, that's it. You went too far, Smitty. Anyway, he was a great mentor to me. He taught me so much. I love the guy like a brother, and miss him every day. I don't know. I can't think of. There's a lot of them, but I can't think of too many.
Were you on the Grant Fire?
Yeah. I was working on my day off, and I was actually selling office supplies, and I was up around Fall Creek and Keystone, and looked downtown, huge column of smoke comes up, and man, I went to a payphone and called the alarm office. They're really busy, you know. There was only like 3 of them in there, and they were busy. I said, "What's going on downtown? The Grant Building's on fire. I don't have time." Boom. So what I did was I went to 23s. That's where I was stationed. Got my fire gear, drove downtown, reported to the scene. They sent me up into the Thomas Building, which was right next door to the Grant Building, which ended up being destroyed, and worked all night. And in those days, there was no overtime. You just did it because you're a public servant. Didn't even think about asking for overtime. There was another funny thing there. Pretty far into the night, somebody leaned out the front window of that Thomas building and looked down the street to what at that time was a Merchants Bank building. And there was moving vans moving everything out of Merchants Bank building and, leaving them. And first of all, you think, well, we got this thing under control. Why, by that time, or it burned itself out, actually. And the other thing you thought was, wait a minute, they're leaving us in here and taking that stuff out. Kind of makes you feel where you are on the totem pole, But, yeah, I was on that one. Trying to think. That awful? Oh yeah, magnesium fire down on Southwest Street. We had, I was in Battalion 13 at that time. Got the run. 29s got there, and 29 squad got there and disregarded everybody because they thought it was a little small fire, and it was magnesium shavings, and. Thing took off. Water got to it. What he said, I ain't gonna say who the guy was. The box burned open, and the magnesium shavings that were burning fell on the ground, and they took off. So he called us back, and I hit a second on it. We're getting some lines set up. Well, magnesium, we had nothing to put it out. So I just had 3 lines set up, or 2 lines set up, and we were going to just back off and protect exposures, and that wasn't going to be a big thing, let the magnesium burn out. And it was decided to go ahead and make up another line and go in there and try to put it out. And we did, it exploded. It exploded 3 different times. Dougie Reno was driving me at the time. He got his back burned where the magnesium, when it exploded, it came back down, went down the back of his fire coat. My brother got hurt. He fell and messed his knee up. And then another guy, Mike Ransom, who has passed. Gosh, all these guys are passed. He got a nozzle in the chest, and he was okay. Didn't even have anything cracked. But anyway, the guy says, we're going back in, so I got them together and we went back in again. Like I said, it exploded 3 times before we decided it wasn't a good idea. And I remember I was at the National Fire Academy, and they asked us to bring in videos of some incident that we had on our department, and one afternoon we showed them. And I didn't bring anything in, but I did find that video on that they had in the library, news footage and that sort of thing. And I took it in there, and those guys, they said, God, we can't believe you went in there. I said, well, it's a well-disciplined fire department. They do what they're told. But anyway, that was another one. There's a lot of them.
What would be the most bizarre run you ever went on?
I was thinking,
Stupid category.
yeah, I was thinking of that today, and I actually had something in mind, but I can't remember what it is. Let me think a minute here. Oh yeah, I got it. I'm in Battalion 13 again, and we get a run to the IU School of Dentistry out on West Michigan Street. So we're going down the street. Tommy Roberts, he's passed. He's driving me, and I look over across the street, and I see smoke. You know these little ventilators that look like a aluminum mushroom, little ventilator shafts. I saw smoke coming out of one of them on the other side of the street from where the fire was supposed to be. And no, I saw it coming out of the dental school. I said, okay, we got something, look this smoke. Tommy says, it's worse than you think, look over there. And it was all coming out on the other side. Well, what it was, there was a tunnel that ran under the street from that hospital over to the dental school. And it was wiring and stuff. And there was a wiring room down there, telephone stuff and electric wiring, and that's what was burning. Okay. The guys running the school, the dental school, said, listen, the students were doing root canals on dogs upstairs, and they were anesthetized, and they're starting to wake up. Well, I didn't know that's how dental students learned how to do root canals, was on dogs. So, real quick, I said, so what do you want me to do? He said, well, I want you to help us round them up. I said, are them dogs on fire? He said, no. I said, I can't help you, man. But we did. We went up and helped them out. And that was probably the strangest thing. Well, it probably isn't, but that's one that comes to mind real quick. It was crazy. But I got to say, those guys went down there, put that fire out. We put ventilation fans on the opposite end, on the other side of the street, the hospital, and blew it back into the dental school. I mean, those guys set up ventilation. We kept the smoke out of the hospital on the other side of the street. Those guys did a really good job on that, even though it was kind of weird.
When you were with Chief Smith, was that post athletic club when a lot of the changes are happening? Can you talk about some of the changes that happened with the department?
I was on that review panel, and those guys paid a terrible price to bring this fire department into the modern era. The one thing that we said was we'd like to have all the buildings downtown sprinkled. Of course, that didn't. It went over like a lead balloon with the building owners. They didn't want to pay the money to do that. But it was things like the high-rise training that Chief Feaster gave through the whole department. We had what they call the HOG manual, high-rise operations guide. He put that together. That was passed out. I know in my case, it spurred me to start teaching building construction. I've been doing that for a long time. And what caused that was a situation that they had no idea of. It was in Brannigan's book. I took the class at Ivy Tech, but I'm sorry to say, if that had happened the night before, that had been my guys. What happened was that building had a concrete floor, and in order to modernize it, they had put in 2 drop ceilings, one under the other one. And each of them had insulation and a drop ceiling, the Celotex ceiling, not Celotex, the sound deadening ceilings. But the one that was glued to the concrete slab was made of combustible material, combustible tiles, and the glue itself was combustible. That fire got going up above them. They didn't know it was up there. Once the wires that were holding the suspended ceilings up melted through, the ceiling dropped down, and they were under the world's largest broiler at that time. And when we went and talked to the people who were on that fire, it'd break your heart. And I made up my mind that I was going to see to it that as long as I was around, I was going to teach that class and make sure, and I do it to this day, although I haven't taught for several years, but if I did, I would tell them the first night, the first thing I want you to do when you go into a place, you got smoke, maybe there's heat, maybe there isn't, is take a pike pole and push that ceiling up and see what's up there. If there's flames, if there's smoke, if heat comes down, then don't go in there any further till you get water and you're ready to attack the fire. I remember we didn't have hoods. After we got finished with that review panel report, we didn't know it. Chief Smith was called over to the city-county building. He was acting chief at the time. He was called over to the city-county building, and when he came back, well, they gave him the chief's job right then. And when he came back, I remember the lady who did the purchasing for the fire department, we were all in the sevens looking at the news conference, and the lady that did the purchasing for the fire department, Chief Smith, looked at her and said, Gail, I want you to order 800 or 750 hoods. I'll get you the specs for them. And I knew right then and there that he is the new fire chief, because before that, nobody would have had the, never mind, wouldn't have had the guts to do something like that. He knew he had a mandate, and he lived up to it. We got new equipment, new breathing apparatus. All the turnout gear was changed. Of course, the hoods that I just mentioned, it was a new ballgame. Even our station wear became fire resistant, the Nomex stuff. Spent a lot of money that they had never done before, So I think we made 57 recommendations, and a lot of them went through. And there was never, that I can think of, in so short a time, so big a change in the fire department, at least the time I was on. Now, I'd have to say, what's happened since I left and what's happening now, there's been a lot of good change. Chief Malone's doing what I consider an excellent job. As I said, I talked to Chief Dryman a couple days ago, and I was very impressed with his abilities. The training, everything is a lot better than it used to be.
What are some of, reflecting, what are some of the history and traditions of IFD you think are important to carry on to teach younger generations that come on?
Before I say that, before I start on that, let me say this. There's one that I don't know if I just missed this or not, but it's my understanding that before a person can put in for an assignment, you have to call the company and ask to get their permission these days. I think that's one of the worst ideas I ever heard. I think if you have the seniority and the technical skills that are required for that job, then you should get it, and not somebody's, friend or whatever. Anyway, I can't understand it, and I don't remember ever that being a, you might have made a courtesy call, but nobody had the right to blackball you and tell you couldn't do it. So that's just a bad thing. The traditions is, don't forget the past. What you're doing here is talking to these old dinosaurs and having them tell you about, not being paid to go to training, that type of thing. Every day, almost without exception, when I get up, the first thing I do is think about how lucky I was to get on the Indianapolis Fire Department and have a career that was 30 and a half years. My dad came on May 25th, 1946. I was born April 28th, so virtually everything that I put on my mouth or on my back, except for the 4 years I was in the Air Force, has come from the city of Indianapolis and the Indianapolis Fire Department. And you should appreciate what you have. Make sure that you carry on. Don't do anything to shame the fire department. Try to have a positive outlook and do everything you can to boost the fire department. If you hate the job, get off of it. You know, personally, I loved every day I was on it. I can't think of much else along those lines. Just love the job. That's the main thing.
Getting back to the stupid column, what are some of the stupid things you saw in the firehouse that firefighters are well known to do?
I can't, a lot of that I can't mention. My daughter says, Dad, in fact, she just sent me a message the other day, said, you ought to write a book. I said, I don't think so, sister. But water battles, water fights. Something would happen. Guy might be washing windows. And you walk up to him and say something smart, or you might be washing windows and he'll say something smart. So you just take the bucket and throw it on him. Then the battle would be on. It could go on for hours. You'd think you were safe and you'd be in bed taking going to bed at 10 o'clock at night. You know, you still get nailed. Just things like that. I can't think of anything offhand. I wish I had more time on that one.
Numerous to mention.
Yeah, but that's one thing there.
How do you think the cooking has changed over the years?
Well, when I worked, first of all, I was a pretty good cook. I come from a long line of cooks. My mom was a good cook, and my grandma owned a tavern, and she was a cook. And I always took an interest in cooking. When I was in the Air Force, I had a heating pad, a pot, a burner, 2 burners, and pots and pans, and I would make meals in my room. Well, that was, you weren't allowed to do that, but there's a lot of things you're not allowed to do that I've done. But anyway, I knew how to cook quite a bit. And as I said, I would go in there and watch guys cook. That's how you learn to cook, is to watch somebody else and have them show you how to do it. Food was pretty good. I was a permanent cook for a long time at the 23s, and when you could get a permanent cook, it was usually a pretty good deal. You didn't have to do any housework, because you had to go to the store and get lunch ready, blah, blah, blah. And nobody ever insulted the food, because you might quit on them. So we had, in my opinion, pretty good meals. And next, I don't know, I think it's maybe the culture these days. I was raised on home-cooked meals, so it was a good deal. I think a lot of kids nowadays are raised on chicken fingers and French fries, and they don't know how to cook either one of them. But I imagine there's probably still some good cooks. We had bakers, Jim Short, Danny, it was out to 27s, Danny,
Smith?
no. This was before him. He fell and broke both of his wrists up at the Fives when he was in the shops.
I remember that story. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah. Anyway, he was a good baker. That guy would come in, and before lunch, he'd have homemade cinnamon rolls. It was neat. A lot of good cooks. We always had, the chili cook-offs and stuff like that, but there's a lot of good cooks. How it is now, I'm not sure. I don't know.
What year is Coliseum? 63?
63, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Was your father at the Coliseum?
No, I remember when that happened though. We took the paper, and he was getting ready to go to work that day, and they were already up, and I was still in bed. And my dad got the paper, and he said, "My God, Betty, the Coliseum blew up last night." Betty was my mom's name, and I remember it very well. And we talked about that in the building construction class too. He wasn't on that. He was on the Canary Cottage. That's a famous one. Was on the Circle. It was a restaurant, and if you look at pictures of that, you won't see anybody in a breathing apparatus, but yet that smoke is pouring out of that building, and they're going in there. I want to say this about my dad. I cannot tell you how many people I had tell me this when I came on. That pound for pound, my dad was the best fireman they ever knew. He retired as a corporal. I don't think he ever wanted to be an officer, but he knew how to do his job, and he was good at it. He went in that fire and helped put it out. I'm not saying he did it by himself, but there was a lot of guys. There was a lot of guys that either wouldn't go in, or if they did, they come out on a stretcher. I got another little story for you here. Bad fire, a lot of smoke and everything. The chief sees, before breathing apparatus, the chief sees a guy standing out on the street, truck guy, leaning on an axe. Chief says, "Get in there. Get in there and help those guys out." The guy says, "Hell, Chief, there's better guys than I am coming out. I ain't going in there." All right, that's that one. Then, let's see.
On the Canary Cottage fire, several guys were hurt.
Yeah.
And the floors collapsed and pancaked.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, there's a bad fire.
A lot of people don't know about the Canary Cottage.
Yeah, well, it was a long time ago.
53, 54.
And another time, my dad, tell you this one, when it was either Keegan's or High Grades, I think what that was a slaughterhouse, and over the years, all this hog fat had soaked into the floors and gotten down into the basement of the place and everything, and it caught on fire while it was under demolition. This guy named Eddie Rogers, who passed, told me one time that he was with my dad, and they were down in the basement of that place, and they had ordered him out. And my dad said, "You guys get out, I'll hold it till you get out." And Eddie told me that, and it wasn't long before he died. So like I say, this business of being a fireman's kid can be a two-edged sword. I've heard him say, "The old man was pretty good, but the kid just ain't packing the gear." So it can go that way. Or they can call you a chip off the old block. And I've been called a lot of things. I don't know what they call me. But anyway, had a pretty good set of shoes to fill there.
I want to go back to training, since you were really big into training and being the training chief. What has FDIC meant to this city and this department?
Well, the first time I went to FDIC was when I was at the training academy, and myself and Dick Van Sant and Don Johnson, hey, they're still alive, went down there when it was in Memphis. And then it moved from there to Cincinnati, and then it moved up here. Well, just think about it. You have access to all the best instructors in the country. You can go in there and listen to an hour-and-a-half class from all of these people that are writing books and giving classes all over the country. John Sulka, Vinnie Dunn, all these guys. And take advantage of that, and it costs nothing. You don't have to leave home. You can go home that night and you know, sleep in your own bed. So to me, it's been a boon. We ought to do everything we can to keep it here. And I'm just speaking from the fire department side, not from the tourism side or any of that stuff. But it's been a real boon to the fire department. Now, I will say there is one bad side to it. Every year when FDIC would come here, after they left, seemed like I'd come into the office on Monday morning, and there'd be a line of 6 guys outside the door, and each of them is holding a brochure for a piece of equipment that they never knew existed before last week, and if I didn't buy it, I'm a murderer. So that was the bad part. Well, we really need these left-handed monkey wrenches or something, you know what I mean? And so that was one of the things that that was a downside to it. But and I'll tell another thing. Frank Brannigan used to come to those FDICs before he passed, and I got in with him. And every year when he would come, I would go out to the airport and pick him and his wife up. She always came with him, and get them to the hotel, and then see to it they got over to the convention center and everything. And then one night we would go to supper. And I remember the first night he said, "I'm buying." I said, "Okay." And the next year I said, "Okay, it's my year to buy." He said, No. Fire engineering's paying for this. Don't, you ain't buying anything, you know. But he was another inspiration to me. He was in the Navy during World War II, and he was supposed to be on the USS Juneau. And I don't know how many people know about that or not, but that's the ship that the 5 Sullivan brothers were on, and it got sunk down in by Guadalcanal, and the 5 brothers died, all of them, which is another story I want to tell in just a second. And he was supposed to be on there, but he, by some quirk, he couldn't go on the, you know, on that ship, or he would have, well, I don't know if he'd have died necessarily, but he would have been in pretty bad danger. The story I wanted to mention about brothers, we got a lot of brothers on the fire department. You know, I got a brother, Brian Killaley's got a brother, everybody's got a brother. And one time they came to me when I was in Battalion 13, and they said, "We're going to have to move your brother." And we were both at the same station. And I said, "Well, how come?" "Well, one of you might get hurt, or both of you might get hurt." I said, "Oh yeah, the Sullivan brothers thing, you know." Well, I added them up. I had 5 sets of brothers in my battalion in a small geographic area. And I don't care if you moved them or not, we still might be on the same fire. So that was my case, and they dropped it. It was another idea that, I don't know, you're causing a problem when there isn't one, I guess. I don't know. Let's see. That's all I can think of on the FDIC.
Can you speak for a moment on I know at some point in time we're going to be honoring George Symington, and I've been trying to get people's thoughts on George and what they think, just to kind of talk about what he's meant to IFD.
Well, the first time I ever met him, I was at the 23s, and we had a guy there named Ralph Arnold, he's passed, who would go get him. And, you know, he'd wash our cars, and we'd pay him for it, and we'd feed him a meal. My God, he ate so much food that a show dog couldn't jump over it. And that was the first time I ever met him. But the thing about it, he knew every apparatus in town. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's ever said this. He knew every apparatus, where they were stationed, and a lot of the guys that were even there. I mean, that guy was pretty sharp. And through the years, of course, he's aged and I've aged, and but he's, you know, I might go years without seeing him, but he still remembers me. And it's going to be it's going to be a sad day and a loss. Did anybody ever tell you about the time he saved his aunt from a fire? Has anybody ever told you that?
You know what, he actually told the story.
Okay.
And he's told it twice, and it's exactly the same.
Okay.
He remembers it.
See, my uncle was on
Go
two.
ahead and feel free.
Well, if you already know it, but he to put a ladder up to the window, went in and pulled her out, as I remember it. But my uncle was on Engine 2 at that time, 16th and Roosevelt. That's gone now. And he used to go in there. George would go in there, so I'd run into him occasionally in there too. And it's going to be a sad day and a big loss for a lot of people.
Kind of reflecting back on your career, what do you think is your legacy, and what are you most proud of?
I think the training, the people that I trained, I look at it, well, they're running the fire department. Chief Malone came in the training academy under me. Howard Stahl, Fred Purvine, lots of them. Chiefs, almost all the chiefs are there. So the training that got them started, made sure that they knew their jobs. I think that the breathing apparatus and the classes that I've taught over the years, different ones. I've done tactics, building construction. I have a class called First In, Last Out Leadership. That was the book by John Salka, and I think that's where they got the title for that video that they used, that they made that video from. Anyway, teaching classes on it's a leadership class is what essentially is, and it's not that, okay, you disobeyed a rule, I'm laying you off, I'm reprimanding you. You know, what you're looking for is a change in attitude in that person, and try to get them to do something correctly, and give them a reason to succeed. And I enjoy giving that class. I use a lot of stories that happened. There'll be a story that comes up, and that'll remind me of some incident that I was on, and I'll tell that story. So that's another one. I have a hydraulics class that is gangbusters, but the only time I can get any department to use it is when they're required to take a hydraulics class. Nobody will take a hydraulics class on their own. So anyway, that was that. But anyway, it's the training. I always said that I was a better training chief than I was an operations chief. I enjoyed it. I would think I was made to do that. And it's probably what I think of when I think about what I left behind the fire department.
You mentioned something to me that was interesting the other day. You said for a while you kind of stayed away, and now you've kind of recently been coming around.
Yeah.
What's that about, and what's your thoughts on
Well, when I retired from Wayne Township, I found out right after that I had diabetes. And between that and other commitments that I had, well, first of all, I spent 8 years at Perry Township, Pike, and Wayne, so that kind of eliminated a lot of, coming around. But then I come down with this diabetes, and I've been working on that. So far, everything's going well there, but I was not in good shape when I first retired because of that. And then for years, my wife, she is my #1 booster, and always has been. And she had suffered because it was always the fire department, always the fire department. Plus, I think when you go out, let the younger guys come up, let them, start getting involved, teaching the classes, that kind of thing. So I was just tired, didn't want to continue doing anything, and I didn't teach any classes for 13 years, and just this past summer I taught a class, building construction, of course, and I'm going to try to get into it a little bit more. I don't have many more years left, and maybe I still have a little something to contribute. But that's the main thing. It's just looking after my wife and letting the younger guys come up. And now, though, I'm seeing this last month or two, probably a half a dozen guys that I fought fires with, worked with, knew them, trained them, passing one after another, and I need to make those connections again, and that's why another reason that I'm doing it.
Brian, unless you have any questions, I just want to kind of end with you. Anything you want to say about anything? Just open it up to any comments or anything.
As I said earlier, you should love the job. If you don't like it, get off. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I remember we had a recruit class, and I made the mistake of using the word fireman. This was the first day that they were sworn in. And one of the female firefighters said, that's firefighter, Chief. I walked over there and I said, hopefully 100 years from now when you're laying in your coffin, somebody walks up and says, she was a pretty good fireman. There's a lot worse things they can say about you. So the job's changed. I try to do the best I can, but I do make mistakes, and I hope they'll remember me fondly. That's it.